Call the meeting.
I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:12 Thursday, August 4th. So we all have our agenda in front of us. And we'll start with our work session, which is going to include, the first thing on the agenda is the updates and training by our illustrious city attorney.
Yes, I've passed out with you, along with your packet, is a copy of the new statute and so that now governs some of our proceedings. For years, Board of Adjustment sometimes struggle with the concept of what's hardship and the variance. Mm-hmm. And so the legislature basically codified some of the case law. And if you look at, if you go down to B1, which is kind of at the bottom of the page there, and it says, in exercising its authority under A3, which is variance, the board may, and it's not required that you use this criteria, but you may use this criteria. And the criteria is set forth in there, basically, read along with me, says that when we're attempting to understand or apply a request for variance and determine what an unnecessary hardship, you can use these factors. And there are 5 of them. And the first is that the financial cost of compliance is greater than 50% of the appraised value of the structure as shown on the most current tax roll, which is your appraised value of your house and structure on your property. So that if I had to build something at the right place under the right circumstances, would it cause me to spend more than 50% of the value? That's pretty hefty in this town. Mm-hmm. I don't think you'll see that very often. If you apply that to a hypothetical situation for a carport, for a house in Coppell, that probably would never reach that 50% number. 2, with compliance, result in the loss to the lot or which the structure is located of at least 25% of the area, buildable area, that's eligible. So Steve would be able to answer that question for you. There's lot coverage requirement, you have setbacks. You can only build within so many feet of your property line, front, back, and the side. And there's a requirement that you can only have so much of your lot covered with an impermeable surface. So if you eat into that so that at least 25% of the area which is developable may be lost, then you can consider the request as creating a hardship. I think we applied that to this one, and there's quite a bit for the one that's tonight. I think it's like there's what, 40 or 50% impermeable surface, so the adding of the carport wouldn't reduce the amount of
the carport tonight, they've got a total allowable coverage of 40%. They're currently at like 20. Yeah. And even with carport, they're still well below the 40.
But that's an idea of how that would apply. You're talking about these in the abstract, really don't mean anything.
Right.
Yeah, you can apply a
the next, and so what we may do is address in staff reports in the future these 5 items in the staff report and say whether they comply or not comply, and give you an idea whether or not the applicant's getting there under this criteria. There's other things that you can consider. The uniqueness of a lot, like this particular lot's kind of unique. It's at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's kind of long and narrow as it's compared to the other lots. It backs up to the park. That might create some uniqueness that's not, makes it different than other lots. It also looks like maybe one of the larger lots in that subdivision, but you know, those things weigh in your decision-making as well, where it is, how the lot's configured, does it back up to a creek, has there been erosion, has the city widened the road, or has there been eminent domain which has reduced the size of the lot, therefore the applicant may need some relief. Okay, moving on to this criteria. Compliance would result in the structure not being in compliance with the municipal zoning ordinance, the building code, or other requirements. I have no idea what other requirements mean in the abstract. We'll just have to apply that as we move forward in a particular case as we see it come. So what we're talking about there is if the structure, if you literally applied the building code, would make the building somehow non-compliant with the current building codes that the city has adopted, and the building official would be able to address that as well. Compliance, and so they need relief, would result in an unreasonable encroachment on an adjacent property owner or easement. So that if I built the building or it wasn't granted relief, would I be imposing a greater burden on the adjacent property, is really what that means. And finally, the municipality considers the structure to be non-conforming. So if it is a non-conforming structure or creates a non-conforming structure as a result of not getting the variance, then that's something that you can consider that creates a hardship and you could grant the variance. You're not wedded to these. You don't have to apply them. It's not a mechanical application. It's just saying these are 5 relevant questions that you may want to ask. So probably I would ask Steve to address these. In most cases, you're going to see the answer's going to be no to these. But it would at least give you some starting point. When you get your packet, you can be thinking about, okay, why should I be considering this variance? It doesn't seem to be a hardship in any reason. And listen to the testimony and our staff representative and where that leads us. And I'll be happy to answer any question. I don't know if the legislature knew what they were doing, but this is what they've done.
Yeah, some of these seem pretty,
Yeah, there's some cases where the judges have talked in what lawyers call dicta, or just remarks in the case, and said, well, we didn't see that there was any, the value of the home or the value of the structure was not significantly decreased, which we would think would be more than 50%. That's just somebody that decided to write the opinion that way, and the legislature has kind of clamped onto those and now codified it. So I don't know if they're any help or assistance to you, but they are some.
a couple of them are. A couple of them seem pretty, like you're just never gonna see them.
Yeah,
Just in my mind.
it's pretty heavy burden for you to get variance, so it always has been probably.
It'd be interesting if you applied the first one to a building that was built out of compliance, and if they had to correct it, they would reduce the value of the property by more than 50%. You could see that one.
So as long as you're going to be out of compliance, be way out of compliance.
Well, right, yeah. It's
Right.
like, hey, you built a second floor on your house, and you didn't have the approval.
In the case you have tonight, we don't have any idea when the garage was built, for which the carport was attached to.
Yeah.
Today, under the current ordinance, you cannot build that garage.
Right.
Because it's within 10 feet.
And generally speaking, what we'll run into is stuff where somebody built an addition onto their home, they got caught after the fact.
Yeah.
And somebody's already living in there. We had
Right.
no idea how the foundation was built. We had no
Right.
idea how it was framed up.
Right.
We'd have to get an engineer to x-ray the slab. We'd have to do destructive inspections. Those are the sort of things that they're looking for, is something that's going to cost that homeowner at approximately 50% of the value of the property in order to verify compliance or get it into compliance.
Right, where they didn't go through the proper permitting and inspection process.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, we're rewarding bad behavior.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Don't just be a little out of compliance. You can go over
for
the
it.
top.
Just be way out and make sure it's expensive.
Well, at the end of the day, my job is to make sure that it's built safe and that it meets the code minimums.
Right.
And if I can do so without doing destructive inspections, we absolutely will.
Okay, are there any more questions on this training? Any questions, discussion?
And if you think of something later, get Steve or Matt or somebody and we'll get an answer.
Okay, so moving on to the next item. We had been given,
Yes.
why don't you lead this, the 6 questions?
Okay, so I handed this out at the last meeting. I don't know if you guys remember. Does everyone want one?
I've got one.
Okay.
I've got one, thank you.
We'll take it. So,
Did my homework.
well, we had some homework, and it was basically to go in and answer these in terms of, as it relates to the Board of Adjustment. So, at this meeting, what I'll do is I'll accept your responses, and then I'll formulate an answer with collective answer, to each of these questions. Looks like Vice Chairman Anderson did her homework, so I'll accept that. And if anyone else wants to email me there, or if anyone else has done their homework, go ahead and turn that in, or else email it to me, and then I can collect those answers and put them,
Compile them.
compile. Thank you.
Here's my homework.
And then I'll, at the next VOA, then we can discuss the compiled answers. Any questions on that?
Can we just turn in what's on the answers here?
Yeah.
Just kidding. You gotta expound on these answers, okay?
It has to be in the form of a question.
Because these are really good answers here.
But these are city employees' answers. To
I
the
see,
questions.
okay.
So
okay.
you've got to answer them as it relates to the Board of Adjustment.
No
So,
problem.
the next, okay, I'll
Okay.
turn it back over to you.
All right, well, moving on to the next item in the agenda is the 2022 appointment timeline.
All right.
So who would like to address that?
Well, so I'll address that. The city secretary's office had sent out some new, kind of their procedure for interviews and appointments to the boards. So I'll read those here. Starting in September, they're going to begin putting it in the newspaper, social media, special events, and signs and handouts to the general public that the boards are available for applications. The application period is going to be between September 12th to October 7th. The interviews will be October 17th to the 21st, and then the appointment period is between November and December, and we'll orient you December 1st.
So the interviews, you said, I'll just write it down.
The interviews were October 17th through the 21st.
Thank you.
So who I've got up this year is Kyle Rogers, Casey Smith, and Mark Allegro. So everyone else is
Safe.
safe, this year. But that's all I had for that item.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The attendance policy, wow. Who would like to address the attendance
That's
policy?
me.
Well, so yeah.
Is
All
that
right,
you?
so yes, well,
No excuses.
it's new and it's not new. Okay, so some of the boards and commissions have in their originating document a requirement that all board members, or any board member that misses 3 or more meetings, regular meetings, or 25% within a 12-month period, that the council shall declare the position vacant and fill and replace the person. So, as a result of them looking at other boards and commissions, they asked me to write that requirement for all boards and commissions except yours. And the reason yours is exempt is because you can only be removed for cause, because you perform a judicial function. So your attendance cannot be held against you. Or non-attendance.
No enabling.
So, but you know, we always have really good attendance.
You just did.
I mean, we always have really good attendance, and if someone's out, then we always have the alternate show up, and so it's never been a problem with the Board of Adjustment. But the new attendance policy is that if you miss 3 or more meetings, you, the liaison, notifies the council, and the council can request the person to appear, and they discuss what the reasons for their non-attendance was. And then they made me define what was an excused absence, so I did that, and it means basically an absence that it's excused if your absence is because of work, medical, family-related, or something beyond your control. So, and that does occasion, I mean, we've had, we've gone through COVID and those kind of things, people that had to miss the meeting because they were sick, or they had family members, they had to sequester themselves because family members had COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you get called out at work, you do have some obligation to notify your liaison if you're not going to be there. And the real thing that the council discussed when we talked about it was they were concerned that we wouldn't be able to make quorums. And that's why they want that attendance policy, to make sure everyone shows up so we can get input from their boards and commissions. Like I say, this one's always been very well attended and people show up when they're supposed to. And if someone's not going to be there, the alternates always show up. And we've never had to cancel a meeting I can recall the night of the meeting because of absenteeism. So that's a new policy. We were asked to explain it to everybody, so we just said everybody, but you guys get a pass.
Yeah,
So
so family vacations and funerals
Yeah.
are both on there too, so it seems
Yeah.
pretty logical.
Yeah, there's been occasions, and things happen in people's lives. We had someone that missed, and they turn around and reappoint them because they had a legitimate reason for them to be gone. So we kind of just said, if you miss 3 or more, you got to tell us why. And if
3 or more over what time period? A calendar year?
It's 12-month period, or 25% within a 12-month period. So, and we don't meet, some boards and commissions meet every month, and like our P&Z meets on a routine basis, once a month, every month, so. And some of the other boards have a regular schedule. We only meet when we're
Called to
convened
service.
and called to assemble
When there's
and
a
touch
need.
rings.
Yeah,
Form of it.
Yeah, it's like a justice league.
that's so funny. Okay, so are there any questions about the attendance policy?
No, ma'am.
Okay, then that concludes the work session. And I guess we're going to open to regular session. What time do we do that? I see it's 6:30 right
Well,
now.
you don't have a time on here, but I don't know what time the applicant
What
is
did we
meeting to go
publish?
out in the big room for the regular meeting.
Right.
Yeah. I thought we had an hour for work session.
We did.
Right, but we
Well, I
post.
purposely didn't put the full hour so that we could.
We can start early if they're
Because
here.
before we have to sit around for 45 minutes.
Oh, that's
Thank
really
you,
cool.
officer thinking.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Well, yeah, we've done that
So
with
what time
several, it starts at
So as
5,
soon as
the
they get
meeting
here.
starts at 6, so if we
Yeah.
got done early, we could go right to the regular
Yeah.
meeting. But what was the applicant?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the thing. Yeah, what were they told?
Do you know?
8 p.m.
Yeah.
I think 6:30 actually.
That would be awesome.
That would be willing. You don't want to continue to serve?
No. I just realized I had my phone, but I'm taking notes on my phone. I'm typing in the interview stuff, and I got a bzzz, and the guy who's like picking my kid up from soccer, his kid's sick, and they're not gonna. My wife's like, ah. No, not that. No.
Good evening. I'd like to, my name is Michelle Anderson. I'm the Vice Chair for the Board of Adjustment, and I'd like to call to order the regular session of this meeting. The first thing on the agenda is, do we have any citizens making an appearance here besides the applicants for the variance that would like to come before the board and bring anything? Are you?
He said he doesn't need to talk. He's neighbors.
All right, well, that's great. Okay, so we'll move on. The first thing we need to do is I hope we've all had an opportunity to review the minutes of the Board of Adjustment from our May 5th meeting, and we would like to go ahead and consider approval of those minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve them as stated.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Motion has passed, and the minutes from the May 5th meeting are approved. Okay, the next on the agenda is we are considering approval of a variance request from City Ordinance Article 35, Section 12352B2A for a carport. Do we have anyone to testify to that this evening? Would you like to come forward, please? Anyone who's going to speak needs to be sworn in. So if you're going to join him, anyone?
Mr. Schubert, good.
Okay. Do both of you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. You are sworn in. Steve, would you like to kick this off?
I'll be happy to. My name is Bob Honeycutt. I live at 337 Park Meadow Way here in Coppell. I'm a 42-year resident of the city, so I've been here a long time. We have a need to add this carport to our property due to the fact that our children gave us a 1957 Ford convertible for this year's Christmas, so we're trying to find some way to protect it. So that's what started the whole process in the swing here, because after 42 years, I know, what do you want to build something now, right? So that was the reason for doing that. This is a very unique property. I visited with the city a number of times. They've looked at a lot of things for me and given me direction on a lot of things to try to figure out what might be the best approach to this. So what I've decided to do is just explain to you how unique, I don't know if you've read all the information there, but it's a unique lot. My personal opinion, being a past school administrator and working with development, I think that the builder tried to squeeze one more lot into this particular street. And so what he did, he didn't want the alley to end up being the last thing on the street. So what he did was put the cul-de-sac alley right next to me, and then he put one more lot on the other side of the alley, which is my lot. So it's a very unusual lot, being that my neighbors on the north and east are you, the city. Duck Pond Park is there. And then my neighbor to the west is Ralph, who's sitting behind me here in the audience, and that alley is between me and him, so no one is truly close. The only property that's even near it is my property owner to the south, which is Ed Reeve, and I believe you received some information from Mr. Reeve about the property there. His is also a unique property in that he has a large easement down the back of his property between me and him. So the requirements there is nothing can be built permanent on that easement ever. So there's not really a factor there I think would affect the safety of his home. I'm 61 feet from his home, so I know it's not close to his house. Anything would be there. Also, all the other distances are 25, 35 feet away from any structure other than the shop that's there right adjacent to it. So I feel like that the public does not have any effect because they can't see the building really from the two streets that are the closest, which would be Bethel School Road and Park Meadow Way. You can't even see that portion of our lot back there because the greenery, the trees, and all the things that are already there over 40-something years of growing. So I think that's not a problem. There's not a safety issue that I'm aware of, and there's no effect whatsoever to any of my neighbors all around me. I did take the liberty to go to talk to every one of them, asked them if they had any questions, would you please tell me? And I showed them my plans and showed them what I was trying to do. And to my knowledge, not a one of them has had any objection to what I was trying to do. So that's kind of the story that I have to bring to you. It's something that we'd like to continue. We started but stopped when the inspector asked us to. And so we tried to follow all the guidelines that Mr. Schubert gave us and do the things appropriately to come before you tonight. So that's where we are.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Steve?
I have put together a small presentation for this particular project. You can see on the front page here, this picture is actually courtesy of Mr. Honeycutt. These are one of the photos that he provided us. It shows an overview of the property. You can see the alleyway, which is right along here. This is the entrance to his driveway, and the proposed carport is going to end up being right about here. Public hearing before the Board of Appeals meeting has been requested by the property owner of 337 Park Meadow Way, Mr. Robert Honeycutt. He requested variance from the city ordinance to allow for a carport on his property closer to the rear property line than the distance allowed. Subject property is a single-family residence on the southeast corner of the cul-de-sac at the furthest southeast point of Park Meadow Way. There is an alley that begins at the cul-de-sac to the west of the structure between it and the neighboring property of 333 Park Meadow Way, and Duck Pond Park lies to the east, with the only adjacent neighbor being at the mutual rear property line of 324 East Bethel Road, or Bethel School Road. Primary residential structure was constructed in 1979, and the applicant purchased the property prior to 1999. Sorry, I don't know exactly what year. That's as far back as Dallas went. This property has a side alley access and currently has a two-car garage as part of the primary structure, as well as a freestanding 500-square-foot garage, which appears to be imminently adjacent to the rear property line at the southeast corner of the backyard. The driveway, which begins at the alleyway on the west side of the property, goes to both the garage and of the primary structure and the standalone garage. Property owner has applied for a variance in order to erect a 320-square-foot carport immediately in front of the standalone garage at no less than 6 foot 6 inches from the nearest posts of the carport to the rear property line, in lieu of the required 10 foot from the nearest posts to the rear property line as required by our ordinance. This here is the section of ordinance that I'm referring to, 12-35-2, subsection 2A, rear 10 feet. The only exception is when the accessory building is a garage or carport with rear alley access, it has a 20-foot setback, but this does not have a rear alley access. It is a side alley access. The only thing that that would affect is the side setback, which he has plenty. He is more than 40 foot from property line to the edge of the proposed structure, so the side setback, he's perfectly fine on that. The owner's authorized agent, his contractor, applied for a permit to erect carport 7 feet from the rear property line to the nearest post on 4/11/2022. The plans were approved with a red line comment to the 10-foot setback requirement on 5/9/2022, and the permit was paid for and issued on 5/19/2022. The contractor began work without referencing the city stamp plans and dug the piers for the vertical posts close to the original proposed 7 feet from the property line. When the pre-pour inspection for the piers was performed by the city's inspector on 5/26/22, the discrepancy between the red line comments and the post locations was noted, and the inspection was failed. The property owner, Mr. Honeycutt, came to the Building Inspections Department to inquire about the reasoning for the red tag on 5/27/2022, and several conversations with Mr. Honeycutt regarding his request for the original design to be allowed. It was determined that the Building Inspections Department could not provide the variance that he was seeking. This is one of the original submittal pages. As you can see, it shows 7 foot right here. And this is page 2 of the comment letter that was provided from the original plan review. Accessory requirements, 10 feet right here for the rear setback, albeit this is the part that is in red to help make sure that the side setback matches the original structure. And this is the approved plan with 10-foot minimum thrown in red line right there. In conclusion, the city is neither for nor against the allowance of this variance. I do not have any input because it in no way constitutes a life safety risk. If you guys did decide to move forward with granting the variance, it would not harm anything in the area. However, without a true hardship, it would be an exception, or it would be setting a precedent, not an exception. And I do have the remainder of all the documents that were provided for you in the slides if anybody wants to see them. If Mr. Honeycutt has anything that he would like to add, or he would like to see any of the documents, I can bring those up.
The only thing I would like to add to that, Mr. Schubert, is I'd like for it not to be a precedence that I'm asking to set for sure, because I know you have a lot of things to deal with. So I'd like for it to be considered an exception. So because of the nature of the lot and the nature of the people that live around me. So that'd be my only added thing.
So did I understand correctly that the work had already begun on this, and then, like, the posts were dug?
Yes, ma'am. The 4 posts were already dug. When the contractor, I visited back and forth with him, and he said, well, we got a permit today. I said, when are you going to start? He said, we're going to start this afternoon. So they dug the holes, cut the concrete on the deal, cut the flower bed, timbers and everything, and dug the hole, and then, is it Mr. Dosher, is that right?
Am I correct that this is a picture of the
Yes,
current?
sir, that's exactly a picture of
Current
it.
condition.
And so he wanted to see some gravel in the bottom of the hole and the wraps around the 4 metal poles. As soon as he asked for that, they stopped the process, and we called, but it was right when we had, is it Labor Day or Memorial Day holiday came?
Yeah.
And so everybody was gone then, so we couldn't find anyone. So when they came back the following Wednesday, the inspector came back out. He saw the gravel was there, saw the wraps that he requested were there. He measured from the fence, and he said it's not far enough to stop the work, so we stopped right there.
So, in order to bring this into compliance, would the financial cost of compliance be greater than 50% of the appraised value?
With what, ma'am?
If we were to require this to become into compliance, since you've already begun this, would the cost of undoing that exceed 50% of the value of your home?
Of my home? Mm-hmm. Oh, no, ma'am, it wouldn't be 50%.
Of your property?
Oh, no.
No.
I'm sure the property's 400,000 or 500,000, so I don't think it would do that.
Okay.
So, is this visible from the park that you're adjacent to? Okay, so it's
No,
not
because
visible
it's
from the
at an
park.
angle. You can see across there, there's a huge magnolia tree right there. I guess if you were to stand back on the Duck Pond Park and look across right at the edge of the building, you might be able to see it, but it's just going to be 4 poles in the roof.
Okay.
And it will match the addition that we put on several years back on the patio, which is a real nice covered patio area that opens up into the park. It's one of the best lots in Coppell.
And you're building on the existing concrete?
Yes, I'd like
That's
to do
already
that,
there.
yes, sir.
Okay.
I do apologize for the quality of the photo, but this photo right here actually shows the 4 poles sticking up out of the concrete.
Gotcha.
And these are the poles right here that are going to make up the 4 corners of the carport.
Yes, sir.
One of the options that we had considered, this is the garage door into the existing separate structure right here. We had discussed the logistics of trying to move these poles over to where they would be compliant with the city ordinance. However, that would place them right dead center of the door going into the existing structure and render that structure completely inaccessible.
Do you think this is a hardship of the nature of the property, or is it a hardship to you that's personal to you because you got the car for Christmas and want to keep it in the carport?
Well, I think it's a hardship that we can't put it on the existing concrete, because concrete's already there. So there's kind of a mixed bag there with that. So you wouldn't want to go spend a bunch of money to lay more concrete and put the structure into the backyard. It'd have to move over into the backyard, change the sprinkler system, change the electric service of the building, change several things to do that. So I think that there's not a hardship to anybody but me. It's not going to be a hardship to you or the city or any other project, just to me. So that's the only way I think I could answer it.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I know the setback came up in the differential. We talked earlier about precedent versus exception. I think even if we considered it a precedent, it would be a precedent for a house that's specifically backed up into a city park on a side alley. And I think that precedent would be pretty unique. Absent that, I think there's some mention of the setback and the difference of the other houses along the alley. If this was one of the other houses on the same alley, would the current setup would it be fine as far as the setback requirements as if they're different for those adjacent properties?
Well, that's different from lot to lot to lot. A lot of these
certainly.
other lots don't back up to another property, which this one does. They back up onto an alleyway.
Correct.
So that would be completely different. They would be rear alley access, they'd have the different requirements. His is absolutely unique in this neighborhood, at least his section of the neighborhood, where he is the only one with a side alley access.
Steve, I've got another question. Is the garage, is the setback applicable to the garage that's existing?
So the existing structure was installed according to the codes and ordinances that we had in place at that time. So unfortunately, I don't know what year that was, and I have not looked up what our ordinance was at that time. Based on the documentation provided by the homeowner, it is 1 foot off the property line. So unfortunately, it was underneath a set of codes that allowed it at that time.
If this is considered an extension of the existing structure, does that affect anything from code?
No. Normally speaking, if we have an accessory structure that is attached to a primary structure, that sets in particular requirements because you're now attaching a structure to an engineered structure. So we need an engineer to look at it, make sure that something happens, it's not going to rip off the side of your house. However, this being an accessory structure, if they chose to attach it to the accessory structure, I do not have any such requirements because the National Insurance Institute is not going to make me do so.
Will the carport be attached to the garage?
No, it is not. It's attached to those 4 poles and then welded. It's a welded format where it'll be welded to a frame on all 4 corners, and then 4x12 runners on the sides on all 4 sides.
Okay.
This is a rendering of what it's going to look like. This is the existing door on the existing structure. These are the 4 posts that you can make out in the photos. It's going to have the cross beam, and it'll have the supports with the hip roof.
It look just like our patio is, right? Try to make it look just the same, really.
Does anyone have any other questions or?
So just to wrap it up for me, we're the attempt to make it look like the current property, the attempt to seek approval from neighbors and things to make sure everything's kosher there before getting permits.
Yes,
it comes down to the 3 feet.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Okay.
It is approximately 3 foot difference between where it stands and what our minimum setback is. 3 feet.
The unfortunate reality is that the purview of this committee is really relegated to a hardship. And so unfortunately, I believe unless council has something else to add to it, I would think that we would be setting a precedent which would, have, unforeseen ramifications on down the road if indeed we were to allow this variance.
Do you have any other properties that you're aware of that has a 50-foot setback behind you and 2 city properties on north and east?
What I was I appreciate you saying that because I was actually thinking the same thing. You do have
It's unique.
a very unique property in the fact that you're on the end of a cul-de-sac, you abut a park space basically.
Yes, sir.
And you don't seem to, the structure would not seem, in my opinion, to impede upon anybody's visual sight lines or any, appearance that may be, a standard from a zoning standpoint. So, does council have anything to add about this?
The uniqueness of the property does not create the need for the variance. Because there's plenty of property to build with the setback. Therein lies the dilemma.
Right.
While it's visually more appealing and maybe functionally more appealing, that doesn't constitute a hardship. If, for example, you couldn't build on the rest of the interior of the lot, and that's the only place you had it, and that was created as a result of the uniqueness of the property, then you would have the other.
Can I ask you what the definition of a hardship is then?
Yes, the definition of hardship is uniqueness of the property makes the building that's sought to be constructed can only be constructed because of the configuration of the property. You want it where you want it because that's where you want it. But you could build it with a 10-foot setback. Therein lies your problem.
Yes, I could build it with a 10-foot setback if I made several adjustments to the existing building, the concrete driveway, all those things that are already in place. So that would be, I don't see common sense at all involved in that decision.
Not a common sense remedy. Because
Okay.
what they're doing is they are altering a piece of legislation that the council passed to put a 10-foot setback. And they have to act as quasi-judicial body and can only grant a variance. There's nothing in the ordinance that allows a special exception. So if you do this, you add then this, they can grant those, but there's no provision in the ordinance for there to be a special exception for your problem. You could write one.
Yes, sir.
They would direct me to do so.
I don't think so.
And say that if you have a lot that's sited on two sides by a lot, and I can tell you how to do this. With unsighted with a public access on one side and a public park on the other, ergo, then that would create a special exception. And therefore, you would be the only guy in the neighborhood that has an alley on one side and a city park on the other.
I am the only guy in the neighborhood that has that.
But that would have to be done by the council, not by, they can't rewrite the ordinance. The
Yeah.
council can rewrite it.
So
Wow.
unfortunately, we have limited statutory framework to act within.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's what guides us in making our decisions. So we'd like.
Real fast. So we wouldn't be able to consider a unique hardship based on the unique property. We,
Uniqueness doesn't leave him, he can build it with the right setback. If the uniqueness sandwiched him in that he could only build it with the exception, that's the
Sure.
problem. He can build it, yeah, it might cost him more, but you know, as I told you, financial hardship is not a property hardship.
and that's absent consideration for the age of the property itself and other structures that exist, basketball goal, other things that were cited in the
Yeah,
paperwork,
they've been there a long time, yeah.
right?
Yeah, the kind of dilemma that you really have in this case is the current detached accessory building couldn't be built today. And that's he's just building, he's actually increasing the size of his accessory structure.
Increasing the size of the structure that already legally existed.
And you're not supposed to create,
Right.
expand non-conforming structure.
Even if it's not touching that building, it's non-conforming?
Now it's a separate structure.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, it's a new structure, it doesn't meet setback requirements because it's a new building.
Okay. It wouldn't do any good for me to sit here and argue with you. You're a lawyer, but I just think that we're
Well, you're,
way
you're,
off.
you're, you're looking at this from common sense. I'm looking about what the ordinance is.
I think that's what you're hard for.
Maybe ask it this way: Is there a way in which staff could see a justification for this? Let me ask it in the inverse.
Not based on current verbiage. If at any point somebody decided to petition to have the ordinance changed for the setback requirements, all bets are off. But at this time, the way it's verbed, I do not see.
And it's 3 feet.
It is a 3-foot difference.
It's not 3 inches.
But it's also a 3-foot difference between whether or not he can gain access to an existing structure or not. So,
The other kind of unique thing about this is the 50-foot.
Yes, sir.
If it were on his side, I think he would have an argument. She can go over that. And then therefore he'd have to.
Yeah, the 50-foot easement there is non-build on. That's a ordinance that's been there for as long as it's been there, so,
And Atmos won't let you build a.
yeah,
They'll let you put flat work over it, but
Yeah.
they're not gonna let you put.
nothing permanent. Yes,
So
sir.
so he couldn't build this elsewhere in that easement?
No.
on his neighboring property.
On his property, but the easement's on his That's why he was making that argument to you, that there's no damage or unsightliness or burden, what lawyers would call a burden on his neighbor's property because of a 50-foot easement. That's kind of no man's land for that property.
On the left-hand photo here on the screen, you can see everything in this bottom left-hand corner, all the trees and everything down here. That's the neighboring property, and all of that is inside
Yes,
the
sir.
easement.
Yeah, I've got that, and I'll show Mr. Honeycutt.
Yes, sir.
This is the plat for your property. You're the red guy.
Yes, I am.
It shows the 50-foot gas easement. That's why I
Okay.
wanted to give it to you. See, the back here, the green is his street, and then the red is his lot, and then that area right next to it is the 50-foot gas easement.
So it really makes,
If the gas easement was on his property, then it would have a uniqueness. It would be for him not to build on that,
Yeah.
because that's something that we allow to happen.
the, all of the residents on Park Meadow Way on the south side of the street enter their garages from the rear and turn into their garage going to the north. On mine, I have to come in and turn to the east and then turn to the north to enter my garage. I have to make two turns to get into my garage. All the rest of them do that, and there's 6 structures all the way down that alley that are on that side. But again, as Mr. Schubert helped me with, is that the alley is the factor there and not the property side. If the alley just kept on going to the east, it wouldn't be an issue here whatsoever, so.
Okay, is there anything else? Any other considerations, questions, testimony? Mr. Honeycutt?
No, I really don't have anything else. I really, that's the reason, one thing I didn't want it to be anything but exception to the rule because of the nature of the lot. I didn't want to set a precedence because you have lots of other things being built across our community. And it is my community, you know. I've lived here 42 years, so it does mean a lot to me. You just don't throw something up somewhere. That was never my intent. That was never what we do. I stated exactly to you why it was even being considered. I wouldn't have lived there 42 years without it had I not have a need to put it there.
Understood.
I'd like to just say, thanks, to council for giving us that salient explanation. I will say that I'm certain you have a sympathetic board here, sir. If it were under our guidelines to be able to grant you this variance, I could tell you that personally, I would do it. Unfortunately, we are bound by our requirements to uphold, the zoning
Yes, I
that is
understand.
currently in place within the city. It's, as I have been personally reminded, it's not our place to come in here and make zoning rules on Thursday evening.
Yes.
It's our place to interpret it and see if it falls under the definition of what a hardship is.
I understand.
Okay, we're ready to entertain a motion? Would anyone like to make a motion, maybe with your help?
I always tell you to
Yeah,
make a positive.
in the positive.
motion, so I would recommend you make a motion.
To approve. Right.
Variance, if requested, it must receive 4 affirmative votes for it to go into effect. If it does not receive 4 affirmative votes, then the matter is
So you want a positive deal and then vote negative against it? That's politics, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'd make a motion to approve the variance request here before us this evening. Do I need to name the variance request for the record?
This request is for a 3-foot variance from the rear setback for 337 Meadow.
337 Park Meadow Way.
The variance for 337 Park Meadow Way, and it's 3-foot variance. I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote, starting.
You just want to do a hand vote or
Sure.
you want to do a roll call?
All,
Y'all want me to turn around?
we don't. All those in favor of the motion, passing the motion, raise your hand. All those deny? I'm sorry, we do not have 4 affirmative votes. Thank you.
Mr. Schubert, for all your help, sir. You should have sent him on vacation, though. Oh, man.
Thank you, Mr. Honeycutt. All right. Hearing no other business before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.